There's a certain silence that comes after something breaks. Not the loud shatter of glass, not the crash of a life collapsing, but the stillness that follows when even the dust seems to hold its breath. That's what my marriage to Seraphina felt like in the end, a silence so heavy it pressed on the ribs. We were married in early winter. The kind of winter that looked beautiful from a distance, soft white draped over a dying world, but once you stepped into it, the cold bit through your bones. She stood beside me in her silver dress, her face as perfect and untouchable as frost on glass. I remember the way her hand trembled when I took it, not from nerves, but from restraint, as if my touch was something she had to endure. I told myself it didn't matter. That love could grow from duty, that maybe, over time, she'd see me, really see me, for the man who stayed, the man who chose her despite the cracks in our foundation. But love doesn't grow in frozen soil. Seraphina wasn't cruel in the way stories make people cruel. She didn't shout, she didn't strike. She simply withdrew. Each word from her was polished, measured, wrapped in civility, but there was an absence in her tone, a kind of polite disgust she never needed to say aloud. When she looked at me, I could feel it, that quiet judgment. That thought she never voiced but I knew was there. You're not him. There was always someone else in the space between us. A ghost with her eyes, her smile. The man she had loved before the marriage arranged her life like chess pieces on a board. I was just the move her father chose to make. At night, I would sometimes wake up to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. The city lights reflected off her hair, painting her in gold and sorrow. She looked like a painting trapped behind glass, beautiful, unreachable, and painfully aware of it. "Can't sleep?" I asked once. She didn't turn to me. "No, some things don't let you rest." I wanted to ask what those things were. I wanted her to trust me enough to answer. But I didn't, because deep down I already knew I wasn't part of her sleepless nights, only the silence beside them. When she left, she didn't scream. She didn't even say goodbye. Just a folded letter on the kitchen table, written in her elegant hand. Words like "I'm sorry and you deserve more," and this was never real. I read it once, then again. And again, until the words lost their meaning. Until the ache settled in, a hollow sort of pain, the kind that doesn't burn but drains. The kind that leaves you numb. That night I didn't drink, I didn't rage. I just sat there, in the glow of the empty apartment, realizing I had built my world around someone who had never stepped inside it. Years passed. Now, when people ask if I'm happy, I tell them I am. And most days it's true. I built something of my own, not an empire, not a revenge story, but a quiet kind of success. A small design studio, a little apartment full of warm light and mismatched furniture. Friends who laugh easily. A life that's mine. Sometimes I still catch her name in conversations, Seraphina Cross. She became something more polished, more distant, like she was born to stand on pedestals and stages. And once I saw her across the street. She was watching me. Not the way she used to, not with disgust, but with something softer. Something like regret. Our eyes met. And in that one glance, I realized she was still the winter I had escaped from. Beautiful, yes, but if I reached out again, I'd freeze. I turned away first. That should have been the end. But lately, there have been whispers. A mutual friend saying she asked about me. A message I almost didn't open, her name lighting up my phone after all these years. And now I can't help but wonder. After all this time, after all the quiet rebuilding, after learning to live without her, is it truly over? Or has the winter found its way back to my door? They say people don't realize what they have until it's gone. But that's not true. I knew exactly what I had when I had Ethan. And I still walked away. It wasn't ignorance that destroyed us. It was fear and pride and the quiet cruelty of a woman too, afraid to be loved by someone who wasn't supposed to matter. The first time I saw him after the wedding, really saw him, was the night he stood outside my father's house, rain soaking through his suit, hands trembling as he held out his vows like they meant something. And I, foolish, arrogant, looked at him and thought, he'll never understand me. He wasn't the man I wanted. He wasn't the life I planned. I told myself that again and again until I started believing it. And yet each time he smiled at me, something inside me ached, because his kindness was a mirror I couldn't bear to face. He loved me without asking for anything, and I repaid him with distance. I built walls out of etiquette and silence. And when he tried to reach me, I handed him cold politeness in return. It wasn't malice, it was cowardice. And cowardice can destroy more beautifully than hatred ever could. When I left, I told myself it was mercy, that I was setting him free from a woman who couldn't love him the way he deserved. But mercy doesn't haunt you at night. Mercy doesn't leave you sitting in dark hotel rooms, replaying the way he used to whisper your name like it meant something sacred. I remember the morning after I left. The world outside was bright, almost mockingly so. I looked out from the car window and thought of him waking up to find the letter. I tried to imagine his expression, but I couldn't. Because I never really knew how he looked when he wasn't pretending to be okay around me. Years passed. People said I thrived, that I moved up in the world. They saw the expensive dresses, the interviews, the calm voice that could charm any room. But all of it was noise. Because no matter how many stages I stood on, I could never drown out the sound of his silence. The silence he left me with when he stopped chasing, stopped calling, stopped hopping. And then one ordinary afternoon, I saw him again. He was standing outside a cafe, laughing with someone, a woman, warm-eyed, sunlight caught in her hair. He looked different. Not richer, not louder, but lighter, as if the weight I had given him had finally fallen away. The sight of his smile should have made me happy. Instead, it broke something in me. Because for the first time, I realized he had found the peace I once denied him. And I, for all my beauty, my pride, my carefully curated life, had become the ghost watching from the cold. I didn't approach him that day. I couldn't. But that night, my phone sat on my desk for hours, his name typed into a blank message. Hi Ethan, it's been a long time. Delete. I'm sorry. Delete. I miss you. Delete. It took me 3 hours to send one word. Hey. No punctuation, no expectations. Just a quiet knock on a door I had once slammed shut. He didn't reply. Not that night, not the next. And maybe that's what I deserved. To finally understand the sound of the silence I had once given him. Still, some nights I dream of that winter, the one where I first said his name with indifference. In the dream, he turns to me, eyes full of something I can't name, and says, "It's warm here, Sera, you could have stayed." I always wake before I answer. I saw her name before I saw the message. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world feels half asleep, rain tapping against the window, the faint hum of the city bleeding through the curtains. I just finished sketching out a client's design when my phone buzzed. One word. Hey. No punctuation, no explanation. But I didn't need one. Her name alone was enough to pull me back into a season I thought I'd outgrown. It's strange, the things you remember. Not the vows or the arguments, but the smaller details. The smell of her jasmine perfume on cold mornings, the sound of her heels crossing the hardwood floor, the way her fingers used to trace the rim of her coffee cup when she didn't want to talk. I told myself I was over her. And mostly I was. But when her message came, I realized that being over someone doesn't mean you've forgotten the language of their absence. There's still a part of me, quiet, stubborn, that remembers her not as she was, but as she could have been. I didn't reply, not right away. For hours, I just stared at that word. Hey. It sat there, like an old ghost politely knocking on a door that should have stayed locked. I poured myself a drink I didn't finish. I went out onto the balcony, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. The city below looked the same as it did back then, but I was. Back then, I waited for her. Now I just breathed. My phone buzzed again. Not another message, just a reminder from the calendar I'd set long ago. Meeting, new client S-Cross Interiors. For a moment, I thought it was coincidence. But no, life doesn't deal coincidences this cruelly. She was back. Not just as a memory, not as a text, but in the same world I had rebuilt without her. And part of me hated how my heart reacted. That split-second surge of something between dread and longing. Because no matter how much I'd grown, no matter how much I'd changed, her name still had gravity. When I saw her again, it was almost cinematic, like the universe had been waiting to test me. A downtown cafe meeting, sunlight pouring through the glass. She entered quietly, her hair pinned up, eyes unreadable as ever. But there was something different this time, not the icy composure I once knew, but a subtle tremor beneath the calm. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, voice careful, like she was speaking to a wounded memory. "Seraphina." I nodded once, and that was all. The silence between us stretched, not sharp this time, just heavy. Years of unspoken apologies filling the air like fog. "I didn't expect you to agree to meet," she finally said. "I didn't," I replied. "Business comes first." That flicker of hurt in her eyes, I caught it, even if I pretended not to. For once, the power wasn't hers anymore. She exhaled, the faintest quiver in her breath. "You look different." "Older?" I asked. "Calmer," she said, like someone who found peace. "I had to," I said quietly. "You can't live in ruins forever." Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, maybe I'm sorry, maybe I still think of you. But no words came out. Only the faint sound of the rain outside, soft and merciful. As she spoke about the project, I watched her hands, graceful as always, but less steady. There was guilt in her posture, regret in her eyes. But I didn't want to reach for it anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what broke you. Sometimes, it just means learning to look at the wound without reopening it. When the meeting ended, she hesitated. "Ethan, would you ever?" I didn't let her finish. "I wish you well, Seraphina, truly, but I think we've said everything that mattered, even in silence." For the first time, she looked small. Not fragile, but human. I stood, gathered my things, and left her sitting there. The woman who once shattered me now staring at the man who had learned to survive. As I stepped into the rain, I realized something. Closure doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from walking away. Without anger, without regret. And finally meaning it. There are moments in life that don't feel real until they've already slipped through your fingers. The meeting with Ethan was one of them. For weeks, I had rehearsed what I'd say if I ever saw him again. Every apology, every explanation, every trembling confession I never gave when it mattered. But when I finally sat across from him, the words turned to ash. He looked older. Not in the tired, defeated way I remembered, but in a way that made him feel complete. His presence was steady, grounded, the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt himself from the dust I left behind. Even his silence felt different now. Before, it used to feel heavy with yearning. Now it was calm, untouchable. And I realized painfully, beautifully, that he didn't belong to me anymore. After the meeting, I sat in my car for nearly an hour. The rain tapped softly against the windshield, a rhythm that felt too much like goodbye. I could still see him walking away, no hesitation, no backward glance. That was when it hit me. The man who once waited for my affection now walked with the grace of someone who no longer needed it. I used to find comfort in his devotion, even when I didn't deserve it. Now that it was gone, I felt like a star burning without its orbit. I went home to an apartment that felt more like a stage than a home, spotless, silent, suffocating. The trophies, the framed magazine covers, the awards on the shelf, they all stared back at me like accusations. Achievements meant to prove I was strong, successful, independent. But strength means nothing when you have no one to share it with. I took off my earrings, my heels, my mask. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not the quiet, restrained tears I used to allow, but the kind that came from deep inside, raw, shaking, almost childlike. It's strange how regret works. It doesn't come all at once. It trickles in slowly through late-night thoughts, old photographs, fleeting glimpses of what-ifs. For me, it came through him. The way his voice didn't tremble when he said my name. The way he didn't try to make me feel guilty. The way he didn't need me anymore. He had forgiven me, I think. And somehow, that forgiveness hurt worse than hate ever could. That night I dreamed of our old apartment, the one I left without saying goodbye. In the dream, the lights were still on. The kettle was whistling softly on the stove. He was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting, as he used to. Only this time, when I reached out, he didn't look up. He just smiled faintly, eyes focused on something beyond me. And then slowly, the world around him began to fade. Walls dissolving into golden light, until all that was left was the quiet hum of his peace. I woke with a name on my lips and tears on my cheeks. The next morning, I stood before the mirror and studied the woman staring back. Perfect makeup, immaculate hair, empty eyes. "Who are you now?" I whispered. The woman didn't answer, she never does. But somewhere beneath the layers of poise and polish, I heard a smaller voice. The one I buried long ago. The one that used to believe love could save her. And for the first time, I wondered if redemption was still possible, not from him, but from myself. So I did something small, something honest. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not a message this time, not a plea. A letter. Not to send, just to write. To finally say everything I never could. Ethan, you were never my mistake. You were my mirror. You showed me what love looks like when it's unselfish, and I ran from it because I didn't know how to receive it. I've spent years learning how to be seen without fear. And though you'll never read this, I want to thank you for teaching me that love, even when lost, can still make us whole. When I finished, I closed the laptop and whispered his name. Not to call him back, but to let him go properly this time. It's strange how quiet peace can be. You spend years clawing your way out of heartbreak, dreaming of calm, and when you finally find it, it almost feels empty. Like a silence too still. A calm that remembers the storm. It's been weeks since I saw Seraphina. Life has gone on meetings, coffee runs, late nights sketching under the hum of my desk lamp. And yet, every so often, I catch myself thinking about her. Not in the way I used to, not with longing or pain, but with a kind of weary compassion. The same way you might look at an old scar and think, I remember how much that hurt. I thought closure would mean forgetting her. But now I realize closure isn't erasure. It's acceptance. The day after our meeting, I walked by the cafe again. She wasn't there, of course. But the table we sat at still had that faint, amber glow of the afternoon sun spilling through the window, like the world had framed that moment and moved on. So I did the same. I threw myself into work, the projects, the clients, the people who made my days lighter. I went out more, laughed more. And somewhere along the way, I started seeing someone new, Mia. She's the opposite of Seraphina in every possible way. She doesn't walk like she owns the world. She trips on sidewalks, laughs too loud, burns her coffee every morning. But she's real. And her warmth isn't something I have to earn, it's something she gives freely. Still, even with her hand in mine, a part of me carries the quiet ghost of Seraphina's touch. Not as a wish to return, but as a memory of where I learned what love shouldn't feel like. Last night, though, I dreamed of her again. We were sitting by the window, the same winter light pouring through. She wasn't cold this time, just tired. And for once she smiled, a soft, broken smile that made her look almost human again. I asked her, why now? And she said, because I finally understand what I lost. Then she faded, the way snow melts when sunlight finds it. When I woke, there was no ache, just the faintest warmth, like forgiveness lingering in the air. Sometimes, I wonder if we ever truly stop belonging to the people who changed us. Maybe we just carry them differently. Not as burdens, but as quiet lessons stitched into who we've become. Seraphina taught me how to break, but she also taught me how to rebuild. And maybe that's what love really is, not permanence, but transformation. This morning, I received a letter. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting, the same elegant curves I once traced with my fingers. Inside, no apology. No plea. Just a few lines written with the trembling honesty of someone who has finally made peace with herself. Ethan, some stories aren't meant to be rewritten, but I'm grateful ours was written at all. I hope your days are full of warmth. You deserve it. Yes. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in my drawer, and went about my day. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. Just whole. Maybe that's all healing really is. Not finding a perfect ending, but learning to live with the spaces between what was and what could have been. There's a point when winter doesn't end, it just fades. Not with fanfare, not with sudden warmth, but with the slow surrender of cold. That's what healing felt like to me. A gradual thaw, a quiet acceptance. Months have passed since her letter. It sits in my drawer, untouched but not forgotten. I don't need to reread it. I've memorized every word, not because of longing, but because it feels like closure pressed into paper. My life now feels mine. The mornings aren't haunted, the nights don't echo. And sometimes, when I walk past a flower shop, I still catch the scent of jasmine and think of her not painfully but fondly. There's peace in that. A soft human kind of peace. Seraphina. Spring crept into the city without asking. One day I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains, soft, golden, unapologetic. I made coffee, opened the window, and realized I hadn't thought of him in days. Not because I stopped caring, but because I stopped needing to. I've started teaching again, design classes, mentoring students who remind me of who I was before the world taught me to wear armor. They talk about love like it's something fragile and wild, and I smile because once I thought the same. Ethan and I, we were two people caught in the wrong season. He tried to plant warmth in a frozen heart, and I mistook his patience for weakness. But he grew without me, and I learned to stand without him. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks of me. Not as the woman who hurt him, but as someone who once mattered. I hope so, because he'll always matter to me. Ethan. One evening, I found myself near the old cafe again. The one where we had our final meeting. The light was the same, That soft, amber haze that makes everything feel suspended in memory. For a moment I almost expected to see her sitting there, hair tucked behind her ear, eyes distant but trying. But she wasn't there. And that was okay. Instead, I sat alone, watched the world move outside the window and thought, maybe some stories aren't about forever. Maybe they're about the people who teach us how to love better the next time. Seraphina. I sometimes walk along the river at sunset. The light dances across the water, fleeting, golden, alive. I like to think he walks under the same sky. Somewhere else in the city. Different paths, same light. And that's enough. We don't need to meet again to know that what we shared mattered. Even broken things can leave something beautiful behind. A lesson, a gentleness, a little more grace. Ethan and Seraphina shared. We were not meant to last, but we were meant to change each other. To learn the language of pain, forgiveness, and letting go. To understand that love, in its truest form, doesn't always stay. Sometimes it simply leaves us better than it found us. And as the last traces of winter fade into light, we both finally breathe. Free, forgiven, and whole. 5 years later, the city had changed, taller buildings, brighter lights, louder lives. But some places never really move on. The cafe still stood on the corner, the same glass windows, the same warm scent of coffee and rain. It was late afternoon, golden hour. The light was soft, forgiving. The kind of light that makes old ghosts look human again. Ethan. I was waiting for a friend, scrolling through messages when I saw her reflection first. Not in the mirror, but in the glass, passing by outside. Same walk. Same quiet grace. But lighter somehow, like the years had finally stopped weighing her down. I turned, almost without meaning to. She stopped, as if the universe had tugged invisible strings between us. For a moment, we just stood there. Two people who had once broken each other in silence, now meeting in peace. No rush of old emotions. No aching pull. Just a calm, bittersweet recognition. Seraphina. When I saw him, my heart didn't hurt, it simply remembered. He looked the same but steadier. His eyes carried warmth now, not wounds. He smiled small, real. The kind of smile that said, we're okay now. So I smiled back. No words, no explanations. Just the quiet acknowledgement that some stories don't need sequels. Only closure written in the way two souls meet again and no longer flinch. The streetlights flickered on. Cars passed, people laughed, life went on. And somewhere in that soft golden hour, they both turned away. Not out of avoidance, but out of peace. Different directions, different lives, same light.